Welcome to History in the Eyes of a Southerner with your host, Anthony Allen. On this channel, we will take a journey through time and relate history to the contemporary eyes of modern America. I hope you enjoy the ride as I investigate and document the wonderful events that have shaped our present world. Alright, y'all. So, I figured that I would do something that is a little fun. I've been into history for a long time. Go ahead and give you my background and why I got into history. I've been interested in history since I was a child. Um, I grew up in the South. Those of y'all who don't know, I grew up in Biloxi, Mississippi, born and raised. Um, when I didn't live in Biloxi as a child, I was over in New Orleans. Um, grew up going to the fall muster at Beauvoir, last home of the Confederate President Jefferson Davis. Um, I grew up seeing a lot of the South, and I'm thankful for this. I'm actually thankful that I grew up in the South because, to be quite honest with you, I wouldn't want to be from anywhere else. But this video I'm going to do is probably going to be several parts. I don't know yet. I haven't decided. I may do it all tonight in one video. Never know with me. I mean, I'm bored and sitting here at the house, night off. I don't have a whole lot going on. Maybe I'll just sit here and smoke cigarettes and drink root beer and celebrate my 4th of July weekend just making YouTube videos. I really need to get a life. I realize this. Um, anyway, so let's talk about my family history. Now, I have been on Ancestry. I've been on Ancestry.com for several years now. There's part of my tree that I've made. Um, and I think I started in 2007 and it's now 2021. So 14 years I've been doing this. It's a long time. I'm 36 now. I started when I was, 22? And I'm learning new things every day. Well, I want to start off with something I found in here, and I'm going to pull it up on my phone. I'm going to go all the way back to my 10th great grandfather. His name was Henry Pennington. Now, this is a part of history that's not really talked about in schools these days. This video is probably going to upset some people. I don't care. It's something that needs to be mentioned. It is in our history. Henry Pennington was born sometime in 1620s, I believe. And right around 1650, he came to the U.S. He was born in England. He was actually born in London, and he came to Cecil. He came to the American colonies at the time. Obviously, the 1600s, wasn't the United States, and it wouldn't become the United States for 120 something years later. But obviously, he was. I would assume that he was a spirited young man at the time, and decided that, well, I'm gonna get out of England. He jumped on a ship. Back then, if you came over here and you had nothing, you were penniless. You could come over here and you were an indentured servant. You were forced to work for somebody, and the contract could be between 4 and 7 years that you had to work for. So they liked the young, high spirited boys to come over here, and they would put them to work next to their, if they had any, next to their black slaves. If you brought, there was a way to get a land grant if you had enough money to pay for somebody's way over here. I think if you paid 5 people's way over here, they'd give you 2,000 acres of land, and those people would become your indentured servants. Okay, so if the guy that paid for my 10th great grandfather to come over here and they landed in Maryland, um, he would he would have been forced to take care of them, and he would have been forced, and he would have had the privilege to say, "All right, man, you know what? I got this tobacco plantation over here. Here's a hoe. Here's a shovel. Here's a pickaxe. Go plow that field, man." And they would agree upon a term for the indentured servant to work. And then after the term was up, then the owner would have to give the indentured servant, at the close of the contract, one good suit of clothes, a mule, and would have to give him 50 acres. And I think, I want to say it was like $50, or 50 pounds actually, as it was. Now, seems like a pretty raw deal when you think about it. You don't work for a man for years, but I mean, I assume that if you're working for a man for 4 to 7 years, you got to think he's going to house you, he's going to clothe you, he's going to feed you. You're just going to go out there and you're going to work his farm. You're his slave. And that's basically what this was, is white slavery. And there were quite a few people who came over that way. Quite a few people who later became prominent um, citizens in this country. Now, this guy was on my grandmother's side, on my mother's side. And her maiden last name was Pennington, so direct descendant. You can go back to Cecil County, Maryland, and I've been there. And there is a place called Pennington Point, which I do believe was started by Henry Pennington. But any man who paid his own way to Maryland would receive 100 acres of land. That's your land grant. Any man the way he paid the way of 5 other colonists would receive 2,000 acres. So basically, the best way to get a land grant back then, I mean, 2,000 acres is huge. 2,000 acres is, I mean, that's, I don't know how many square miles of land, but I mean, it's pretty vast, I would imagine. I mean, I'm looking at buying a half acre of land right now in Stone County, Mississippi, and I'm thinking that's big, which it's not. But I mean, when you think in terms of 2,000 acres, it's a lot of land. I wonder if you paid 10 people's way, would it be 4,000 acres? Like, I really wonder if you had multiples that you could do that. So, like, if I paid 50 people's way, I don't know what it cost to get a person across the pond. I assume it was probably a modest amount. Um, but I mean, if you can get 20 people over here, I mean, that's 8,000 acres of land. That is huge. And some of the plantations, I mean, you can do a lot with that. And once you had the land, of course, you had the natural resources on the land that you could sell. But this is the Pennington side of my family I want to talk about. So he grew from that, from being an indentured servant. Now, generations before this, and I'm going from ancestry on this. Looks like his father was Sir Isaac Pennington, and his second great grandfather, which would be my 14th great grandfather, lived at Muncaster Castle in England. So I'm looking for a little bit of help here, y'all. I want to know what would drive somebody from being what I presume living in a castle would be of nobility. And maybe if somebody in England is watching this, and I'm really hoping this will catch somebody's eye. I want to know why somebody would go just a few generations falling from the nobility in England to being an indentured servant 100 and so years later in the English colonies over here. That tells me either my 10th great grandfather was a high spirited adventurer, or he could have been running from something, or maybe his family fell out of fortune. But Muncaster Castle still stands to this day. And it's pretty prominent. As far back as I can go on the Pennington side was going back here. Okay, I've gone back further than I've noticed. But to the nobility, the first Sir that I see, and Sir is a title, was back to the year 1310, Sir John D. Pennington. So it really makes me wonder. You're talking 200 years of nobility, 300 years of nobility, and you're here. Really makes me wonder what makes people fall that far, because it seems like it'd be a hard fall. If not, maybe the Penningtons would have stayed in England and wouldn't have came over here. Certainly not as an indentured servant. This brings up more questions than I have answers to, and unfortunately, probably with COVID, it's probably going to be a while that I don't have a whole lot of money to travel. But it's probably going to make up. It's probably going to take me going over there to find out why. But this certainly brings up more questions than answers. But I have several questions that I would like answered. If anybody has these questions, please help me out. Comment, share it with other genealogists. Keep in mind, I'm an amateur genealogist. I do this on my own, for my own stuff, part time, and I'm very sporadic when I do it. I've gone years without touching my ancestry account. I've gone years without doing any research just because life gets in my way. I mean, I do have a lot of things going on in my life right now. But I would really love to know what makes things tick. But anyway, the Penningtons in this country, in my line, have a lot of they have a lot of interesting things that happen. All right, let's look at Abraham Pennington. Abraham Pennington was my sixth great grandfather. He was born in Cecil County, Maryland in 1718. He died in Jefferson County, Georgia in 1797. His son Abraham Pennington, the best I can tell, fought in the Revolutionary War, but I can find no history of it, no regiment or whatever. And then he had a son Absalom that fought in the War of 1812, and he was with the 12 and 13th Consolidated Louisiana Regiments, and he was at the Battle of New Orleans. He was born in South Carolina in 1782 and died in 1834 in St. Helena, Louisiana. So when you look at my family history on that side, you see a lot of things, a lot of changes. Absalom, his great, I'm sorry, Absalom's grandson, whose also name was Absalom, he was called Abe, was a private with the 33rd Mississippi Infantry, and he died in 1909. His father, William Pennington, actually started part of my lineage being in Mississippi. Sometime after the War of 1812, my family moved to Mississippi. Sometime between 1812 and 1839, and my family has been in Mississippi ever since. So that side has been here for 200 years, mainly in Lawrence County, which Lawrence County has shrunk. Lawrence County, as it's known back then, could be Lincoln County, which is where Brookhaven is, or it could be as far as Jeff Davis County, which is where Prentice is in southwest Mississippi. and the family is still there to this day in that general area, Lawrence and Lincoln County. Not really Jeff Davis County. They were more, a lot of them are around the East Lincoln community that I'm related to. They followed they followed the trail west to the western wildernesses at that time. Now this is going to play hand in hand with probably the next video in this segment. The next video in this segment I'm going to do is the history of Georgia's colony, which later became the Mississippi Territory and later became the majority of the states of Mississippi and Alabama. And the westward movement of people from the original 13 colonies. Folks, I want y'all to think about something. Number one, when you look at history, history's a wonderful storyteller. If you go on to Ancestry, and this is a little tip for you. Number one, in order to find something in your family history and ancestry, know the political situations of the day, know the events of the day. As I said, in the 1600s, we were nothing but colonial people. Jamestown, Virginia, was started in 1607. Plymouth, Massachusetts was 1620. Henry Pennington came here roughly around 1650. If you're going to do this and look at your family's history, look at what was going on back then and see if you can figure out why. Now, obviously, you can't ask them, hey, man, why did you come here? You can't stick a microphone in their face. Obviously, they're dead and gone by hundreds of years. But if you look at what was going on, maybe it can give you some insight as to why they came here. And if you know where you're going, or if you know where you've been, know where your family's been, maybe it'll give you a sense of knowing where you're going. Just a thought. And this is why I do this. I think I'm going to do an entire series on my family's history, and maybe you'll find it interesting, maybe not. Hopefully that you do. Thank you for watching History in the Eyes of a Southerner.